Next month, same volume, more or less mga 12 million. And then August, meron tayong 17 million. Sa ngayon, ang deployment kasi ng ating supply ay tinitingnan din natin yung responsiveness ng mga LGU. Kung yung isang LGU ay ready to handle yung tatawag nating cold chain solution, yun ang binibigyan natin ng prioridad.
The road to stable vaccine supply could be just around the corner. That's according to Vaccine Chief Carlito Galvez. The country expects some 11 million doses to arrive this month.
It's a timely arrival after government opened vaccination for the biggest priority group composed of economic frontliners. The additional supply is also seen to boost LGU's capacity to cater to demand. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Robbie Alampa. You're watching The Big Story. Manila residents hoping to get COVID-19 shots are exceeding available vaccine doses in the city today.
But vaccine czar Carlito Galvez asked for patience, saying vaccine supply may normalize soon with doses arriving by the millions. Romel Lopez has the big story.
Manileños flocked to Ramon Magsaysay High School early Wednesday to get their COVID-19 vaccine shots. The city opened 5 vaccination sites, each 900 doses available. Queues stretch across the school's perimeter. Senior citizens and economic frontliners alike waited for hours until the supply ran out.
Tapos na po yung 900 na slots. Pasensya na po, yun lang po yung inabot na pila.
Security personnel had to send them home, leading to heated confrontations.
Na ipamigay na daw po lahat ang number. Yun po ayon po sa
gano'n na lang po, iwanan nyo na po dito mga tao. Sabihan po.
Ayan po, lalabas po. Para po sila na po ang
Barangay worker Fe was furious after filing a leave for nothing.
Binilangan po kami doon. Kasama na daw po kasi 800. Tapos ngayon i-reject nila. Bakit naman ganun, sir?
COVID survivor Jesuninho said there were even some individuals who cut lines.
Nakakasama rin ng loob. Do, alam ko naman kung gaano kahirap yung pila. Kaso, ang kakapal naman ng mukha ng ibang sumisingit. Tsaka umaga pa lang, wala pong nagmo-monitor. Kaya nga ba ako ng pila, doon ako nagsimula kanina umaga. Kaya nakasama lang ako ng loob. Pangatlong beses ko na pumila na to Wala pa rin hanggang ngayon.
The Manila LGU insists their vaccination drive will remain under a first-come, first-served basis. The LGU says their experience in the past rollout was that reserved vaccine slots were easted due to residents who back out from their appointments.
As long as we don't violate the minimum health protocol, okay naman siguro. At yung pagka-limited naman yung vaccine, sinasabi naman natin sa tao kung ilan lang mababakunahan.
Vaccine czar Carlito Galvez said Manila should observe how other cities do their vaccination.
Sa lahat ng LGU sa Metro Manila, ang kanilang overall policy ay talagang bawal ang walk-in. Gusto namin, kailangan, tinatawag natin na talagang kalkulado lang.
Galvez asked the Manila LGU to add even more vaccination sites. But Manila Mayor Isko Moreno find it's futile.
There is no point na magparami ng vaccination site kung wala namang enough supply.
For now, the Health Department asked LGUs to prioritize older age brackets amid the supply shortage. Galvez says more vaccines are expected in the coming weeks that will stabilize the supply. For News 5, Romel Lopez, we are One News.
Just how many COVID-19 vaccine doses are we expecting in the next months? Let's take a look at tonight's big number. 68 million. That's the anticipated vaccine stockpile come September. Currently, the country has 10 million vaccine doses. That was since March. The country is expecting 10 million more doses this month. 11 million doses will arrive by July, 17 million in August, 20 million in September. But will all of this be enough? Based on government data, around 60 million people comprise the A1 to A4 groups. This means the expected vaccine stockpile until September should only be enough to cover the first dose of vaccines with these priority groups. To talk to us more about the expected bulk of vaccine supply coming, we have with us on the line Health Secretary Francisco Duque. Secretary Duque, welcome po to The Big Story.
Hi, good evening, Robbie and Gretchen, and to all your viewers. Magandang gabi po sa ngalan ng Department of Health.
Magandang gabi po. We are expecting more vaccine supply to come. In the meantime, even without that supply coming in, we are already in the middle of rolling out for A4. Malaking sector po, 35 million. Kamusta po ang rollout sa A4 given that the supply right now is where we are?
Well, the NCR plus 8 is going to be the priority, no? That's about 13 million people or vaccinees, no? And then the outside of NCR plus, that's 22.5 million for a total of 35 million. So where we are now, we still don't have sufficient vaccines. Kulang pa po ito. Meron tayo sa ngayon, more or less, baka mga 10 million. Ang atin A2 pa lang, ang senior citizens na binibigyan natin ng prioridad, mga 18 million kaagad yan, for the first dose. At yung atin A3, individuals with comorbidities, ito naman ang overlap with A4. So this is what I consider the quasi A4, de facto A4 ang A3. Kasi ito yung mga bata naman na may mga comorbidities and at the height of their productivity. And they very well constitute the A4 category. There are about 5 million of them.
Okay. Now, in the meantime, kahit po hindi natin kinakalimutan ng lahat ng region, we do know that the bulk of the supply for vaccines are still largely in Metro Manila. But we're also noting a spike and a surge in many parts of the country. Davao, for one, is seeing a surge. Are we expecting a recalculation or a reconfiguration of how vaccines will be distributed?
You know, we have always been agile. Kung saan meron talaga mga spikes, then we do a shift in some of our stocks, no? But by and large, tayo naman kasi, we are also guided by our metric. Ang metric namin yan, one of which is yung days to last ng stock. Because we've noticed that in some LGUs, no, yung stock nila ng vaccine, ang haba-haba, some 40 days, 35 days. And so this is an indication na hindi nagpupursige ang bakunahan dun sa mga lugar na yon. Whereas there are some LGUs less than 5 days ang stock level nila. Yun, nagre-replace tayo kaagad. So binabalansin natin ito, but one of the major priorities is really where the spikes are. So we add more vaccines to where they're needed.
Okay, Secretary Francisco Duque, maraming salamat po. And
These are the other big stories tonight. Davao City ramps up its vaccination drive as it races against COVID-19 transmission in the area. The City Health Office believes the new variants caused the spike in infections. The CPP-NPA owns up to the blast that killed FEU football player Keith Abslon and his cousin. A group says the incident may be a case of mistaken identity. And Nuggets big man Nikola Jokic is hailed the most valuable player in the NBA. He's the second big man to achieve the feat after Shaquille O'Neal. These big stories after the break.
Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. You're still watching The Big Story. Davao City recently edged out Quezon City with the highest daily cases. The LGU is now banking on ramped-up vaccination, particularly for their elderly. Jem Avancenia with this report.
Davao City is bent on intensifying its vaccination drive as it faces another COVID-19 surge. In Matina Aplaya Elementary School, senior citizens received their second dose. The city government expects to vaccinate about 50,000 senior citizens until June 15.
We are doing the second dose sa Sinovac sa mga seniors. Ito yung mga nabakunahan natin noong May 11 and 12. So, nila ngayon, schedule sila for second dose nila.
Based on latest data, more than 90,000 healthcare workers, senior citizens, and persons with comorbidities have received their first dose. About 20,000 healthcare workers have been fully vaccinated. 9 vaccination hubs are open so far to accommodate more vaccinees. City Health Officer Ashley Lopez says Davao City could be elevated to enhance community quarantine status if the surge persists. COVID-19 facilities in the city remain full and more offices and establishments have been placed on lockdown.
Kung mabawasan natin ang mga kaso sa loob ng 2 linggo, maaari tayong umakyat sa GCQ. Ngunit kung mamaintain ng 200 plus na kaso sa isang araw, possible na ma-extend itong classification.
The health office believes it's possible that COVID-19 foreign variants are already rampant in the city, causing rapid transmission of the virus. But for Dr. Lair Murao, director of the Philippine Genome Center in Mindanao, the surge in cases could be attributed to several factors.
You have the people that need to feed their family and therefore they have to go to work. And then there's the mentality, as mentioned earlier, the moment that the cases go down, then people feel that there's no more threat of the COVID-19.
Yesterday, 244 new cases were recorded in Davao City, bringing the city's total active case count to 2,683. For News 5, Jem Avancenia, we are One News.
Filipinos should be able to expect a happy and vaccinated holiday season this year. That's according to Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion, who told the chiefs that some 20 million COVID vaccines is due to arrive in the coming months. Concepcion said NCR Plus 8 will have the lion's share of these shots. Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere told 1PH sa Totoo Lang that it's possible for the country to further reopen by Christmas, but only if more Filipinos get vaccinated.
Una, yung mga commitment ay pumapasok na. So hopefully po by December ay makapagbakuna tayo kahit 50% of the population and everybody will have a blissful and a happy Christmas.
Time for our next look at some of the day's big stories. The palace denies involvement over alleged troll farm set up in each province. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says having a troll farm is against government policy. Senator Panfilo Lacson earlier claimed that an undersecretary has been using public funds to put up at least 2 troll farms in certain provinces. The United States has downgraded its travel advisory to the Philippines from level 4 to level 3. This means U.S. citizens are advised to take caution when arriving in the country, considering the COVID-19 situation here. Americans are also being reminded to complete their COVID-19 vaccine doses before flying to the Philippines. And President Duterte highlights the good ties between the Philippines and China in the 46th anniversary of the country's diplomatic relations. Duterte wants a win-win cooperation between the two countries to ensure greater peace, progress, and prosperity in the region.
Communist groups are taking responsibility for the mine blast that killed 2 civilians in Masbate. The victim's family says apology denied. And like the government, they are urging the perpetrators to surrender. Jenny Dongon with the story.
The Absalon family cries for justice after the attack by members of the New People's Army that killed 2 of their loved ones. Union leader Nolvin Absalon and his cousin FEU football player Keith Absalon perished on Sunday in a mine blast in Masbate. Last night, the CPP-NPA issued a statement taking full responsibility for the incident. The group apologized, saying it was an error on their part. They also sought to extend any indemnification needed, but the Absalon family says they won't accept the apology.
Masking maghingi sa akin sila ng sorry yung hindi ko matanggap-tanggap yun. Sana magbalik loob na lang sila.
AFP spokesperson Major General Edgar Arevalo questioned the sincerity of the communist group, noting similar crimes committed in the past. Authorities note 2 civilians that were killed by an IED explosion and gunshot in Barangay del Carmen. A similar incident happened in the town of Aroroy in Masbate. 2 civilians also died. The armed forces of the Philippines tells the New People's Army to surrender instead.
Apology kasi is just words. Dapat isurrender nila para magawan ng karampatang parusa yung mga may gawa ng mga karumal-dumal na actions na yun.
The National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-ELCAC, appealed the same.
They want a real apology. You know how a real apology looks like. They lay down their arms.
Progressive group Sentro or Sentro na Managkakaisa at progresibong manggagawa also condemned the violence. They described Nolven as a reliable union leader of the Masbate Electric Cooperative employees. The group believes Nolven and Keith became collateral damage after being mistaken by communist rebels as government troops. But the AFP is exploring all angles, noting the insurgency cases in Masbate.
Ang Masbate has been considered a hub ng mga insurgents, no? Malaya silang nakakilos dito noon pa, but especially with the geographical location of this province, madali silang nakapunta.
Bakit sir dito?
They feel safe dito. They have well-established contacts dito.
State forces are conducting hot pursuit operations against those responsible for the attack. This afternoon, 2 choppers from Philippine Air Force arrived to help in the operations. For News 5, Jenny Dongon, We Are One News.
For the big story in sports, following her U.S. Women's Open victory, Yuka Saso rises to world number 9 in the Women's World Golf Rankings. Saso leaped 31 rungs to crash into the top 10 of the world after her major triumph last Monday. With her victory, Saso is now exempted from qualifying for several major events. She's also short of a slot in the U.S. Women's Open for the next 10 years. Along with this, Saso cemented her spot in the 60-player field for next month's Tokyo Olympics. Time for another quick break. When we return, President Duterte keeps his 2022 presidential endorsement list empty, saying he spots no one deserving yet. As for calls to have him run as vice president, Duterte says his thoughts are on retirement. And a win for the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic brings home the MVP award. He makes history for being the lowest drafted player to win MVP.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. President Duterte says he is ready to retire after 6 years as chief executive, but his party, PDP Laban, is still hoping for a change of heart. Mayan Los Baños with the details.
President Duterte warns his daughter Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte against committing the same mistake he made running for president. In a one-on-one interview with Pastor Apollo Kibuloy, Duterte says the criticisms on the job isn't worth it.
O sana kung bigyan ka naman ng mga 1 million.
1 million a month.
Oo, 1 million ang salary. Tapos bigyan 200, sige ka trabaho. Tapos atakihin ka, criticize ka.
President Duterte also admits he is in a difficult position with calls for him to run as vice president in 2022. But he says retirement is the one on his mind.
Mahirap yan, Pastor, kasi mag-retire na ako.
But PDP Laban members don't want to surrender just yet. They believe the president has yet to ultimately close his doors on politics.
Sabi niya, di ba, I will resist. Gusto ko na magbakasyon, di ba? Ibig sabihin, pinag-iisipan niya. Just like sa lahat ng bagay na didesisyonan niya, binabalanse niya. Ibig sabihin niya, kung siya, pero ibig sabihin, there are greater things na kinoconsider niya. But until such time na sinabi ng Pangulo na hindi na talaga ako tatakbo, ang gawin natin sa PDP ay ganito, ito yung proseso sundin natin, makikinig kami. Makikinig kami sa Pangulo.
For now, Duterte has yet to pick a possible presidential candidate to endorse in 2022. He says he still hasn't found anyone worthy of his endorsement.
Wala, Pastor.
Wala pa, no? So let the time go.
Looking at the political horizon. Maski ikaw, alam mo ba?
PDP Laban Acting Secretary General Attorney Melvin Matibag says there are many personalities in the party qualified to be their standard bearer. But he says they will wait for the president's decision first. PDP Laban is also open to adopting Mayor Sara Duterte as PDP Laban's standard bearer.
Si Mayor Sara, whatever she's doing is aligned to what PDP is doing. So, hindi naman siya malayo sa partido. So, nangyayari naman talaga pati yan. Nangyayari na rin sa PDP Laban niya na nag-a-adapt ng mga kandidato.
Former PDP Laban President Coco Pimentel previously said there's no need to import personalities and that the party will field homegrown candidates. Senator Pacquiao, who is the national president of PDP Laban, also expressed interest to run for president. But Matibag says internal issues within the party should be addressed first. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Senator Manny Pacquiao rebuked President Duterte's criticism against him regarding his knowledge on the West Philippine Sea. Pacquiao, who is also president of PDP Laban, insists he was only voicing public sentiment on territorial disputes. He emphasized the need for government to protect sovereign rights while pursuing diplomatic solutions. In a speech last night, the president chided Pacquiao for his understanding of the West Philippine Sea issue. He urged Pacquiao to study foreign policy first and to understand government's pivot to China.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. Manila slips 6 notches in the global ranking of livable cities this year. The Philippine Star reports that Manila now ranks 109 out of 140 cities in the Global Livability Index 2021. Manila scored 53.4 out of 100 based on the categories of stability, healthcare, culture and environment, education, and infrastructure. Auckland, New Zealand is considered the most livable city in the world. The Philippine Statistics Authority reports that the country's international trade value doubled in April. Based on PSA's preliminary data, the country's total external trade in goods was at $14 billion. Business World reported that this is a 107.5% increase from $6.8 billion in the same month last year. And from News 5, the palace extends the diversion of all international flights from Mactan Cebu International Airport to Naiya until June 12. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said this was to ensure the full implementation of protocols approved by the IATF.
And here are other big stories from around the world. French President Emmanuel Macron said there is no place for violence in a democracy after being slapped by a man during a walkabout in southern France. In a video circulating on social media, Macron reached out his hand to greet a man in a small crowd of onlookers standing behind a metal barrier. The man, who was dressed in a khaki shirt, then shouted, "Down with Macronia," then slapped Macron on the left side of his face. Two of Macron's security detail tackled the man and another ushered Macron away. A police source identified the suspect as 28-year-old Damien Tarrell, who is now under investigation for assault against a public official. A number of leading news websites are back online after a widespread outage linked to US-based cloud company Fastly. Media sites including The Guardian, CNN, New York Times, and Bloomberg News were down for as long as 1 hour. High-traffic government and social media websites were also affected, like that of the UK government and Amazon. Fastly said the disruption was caused by service configuration, but they did not elaborate.
Another big story in sports. Denver Nuggets big man Nikola Jokic has been named the 2020-21 NBA Most Valuable Player. Jokic became the first big man to win the award since Shaquille O'Neal in 2000, averaging 26.4 points, 10.8 rebounds, and 8.3 assists in the regular season. Of the 100 possible votes for MVP, Jokic garnered 91 first-place votes, besting Joel Embiid and Steph Curry. The Serbian also became the lowest drafted player to ever become MVP after he was picked 41st overall in the 2014 NBA draft. Also with the NBA, the Philadelphia 76ers and Utah Jazz Suns were victorious in their playoff games earlier today. The Sixers evened their series against the Atlanta Hawks 1-1 after winning Game 2 at home 118-102. Joel Embiid had 40 points to lead the Sixers, while Shake Milton had 14 points off the bench. On the other hand, the Jazz narrowly escaped the Los Angeles Clippers to take Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinal series 112-109. A game-saving block by Rudy Gobert in the last play of the game and a 45-point output by Donovan Mitchell completed the comeback win for the Jazz.
A herd of wandering elephants from China has already been trending on Weibo for days. Now they're taking the internet by storm. The elephants were spotted sleeping on their side in a forest outside a village in Xiyang Township. One observer took delight in the collective rest. Half of the herd stood guard, while the other half got a shut-eye. The elephants had left their home in a wildlife reserve of southwest Yunnan province last December. Since then, their 500-kilometer trek has been documented and monitored by a dozen drones. The Chinese government has also sent 500 volunteers to guard them.
Hindi sila nasabihan, wala silang suot kapag natutulog.
Alam mo kaya ka naghati? Kasi ang daming turista, ang daming pang camera. Dapat sabay-sabay sila matutulog eh. Ang daming mga camera. So sabi nila, hati na lang tayo.
Ganun pala yun, matulog yung mga elepante.
Bihira ka makakita, no?
Ang sasabi ko lang, sa pandemya, sana all. That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Hall. We are One News. Have a good evening.